Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so welcome everyone, and I hope your meditation is going well, and I hope that this little sutta that we're going to look at today, which is from the Samyutta Nikaya, it's Samyutta Nikaya 45.4, and it's entitled The Brahmain. And interestingly, it's under chapter 45 is about ignorance. So I think as we go through the sutta, maybe we can identify with perhaps why it's in this chapter. And also I like this sutta because I think it's relatable to many aspects that we have in daily life. So let's just start. At Savatthi, then in the morning, the Venerable Ananda, who was the cousin of the Buddha and his attendant, dressed and taking bowl and robe, entered Savatthi for alms. The Venerable Ananda saw the Brahmain Janussoni departing from Savatthi in an all-white chariot drawn by mares. Now, Janussoni was, if you like, the chaplain to the king. So an exalted role, and one he clearly relished because the references to this say that the Brahmin departed Savatthi in a white chariot once every 6 months. And he rode around the city in his chariot, as if strewing the city with the excellence of his personal glory and prosperity. So we might recognize this sort of aspect of behavior in different things that we recognize in daily life. So not only was this all-white chariot drawn by mares, but it sort of goes on. The horses yoked to it were white. The ornaments were white. The chariot was white. Its upholstery was white. The reins, goad, and canopy were white. His turban, clothes, and sandals were white. And he was being fanned by a white chowry. People, having seen this, said, "Divine indeed, sir, is the vehicle. It appears to be a divine vehicle indeed, sir." So maybe we can recognize that, aspects of this sort of presentation and the way that people attribute properties to this sort of presentation. Then, when the Venerable Ananda had walked for alms in Savatthi and returned from his alms round, after his meal, he approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, sat down to one side and said to him, "Here, Venerable Sir, in the morning I dressed and taking bowl and robe, entered Savatthi for alms. I saw the Brahmain Janussoni departing from Savatthi in an all-white chariot drawn by mares," and went on to describe the whole of this appearance. People, having seen this, said, "Divine indeed, sir, is the vehicle. It appears to be a divine vehicle indeed, sir. Is it possible, Venerable Sir, to point out a divine vehicle in this Dharma and discipline?" So here we have possibly an image which is, capturing the popular imagination in what it represents. And it's perhaps, the ultimate presentation of perhaps success and prosperity and status and all of these things. And then we have these monks who are wearing rags and following the teaching of the Buddha. And we can kind of perhaps be in Ananda's shoes here and wonder, well, what is it that we have that it could inspire in this way? And the Buddha replies, it is possible, Ananda. The Blessed One said, this is a designation of this Noble Eightfold Path, the divine vehicle, and the vehicle of Dharma, and the unsurpassed victory in battle. Right view, Ananda, when developed and cultivated, has as its final goal the removal of lust. So this is the attachment to sensory experience, which is the 5 outward senses, the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the tactile body. Has the removal of hatred, so this is aversion, and the removal of delusion. So delusion here is our capacity to take experience personally. So the delusion is when we begin to take experience and make it about me, mine, or my own. And so the Buddha was very clear that whilst we are under that delusion, all of our experience is clouded. We don't have the capacity to see clearly. In this way, Ananda, we have the Eightfold Path, which is right view, right intention, and with Bhikkhu Dharma Gavesi, with Bhante Vimramsi, we had a very clear description of the Eightfold Path. So right view for Bhante was very much linked to a harmonious perspective. What was the perspective that we took? What was the view that we used in our own approach? How did our perspective color our experience? And he very much liked the word harmonious rather than right, because he was very keen to have this sense of balance. And the whole of the middle way, the whole of the middle path of the Buddha is about establishing balance, not having one extreme or the other. And one of the things that this Brahmin represents is one extreme in society. Possibly no one, maybe not even the king, could emulate what he was doing every 6 months. So with right view and right perspective, one of the things that we begin to look at is taking a more impersonal perspective on our experience. So right view is beginning to address that delusion. And then the second of the Eightfold Path, this is about right thought. And Bhante would prefer to call this right, harmonious imaging. And he often would ask us, what is the image we have of ourselves? Well, it's very clear the image the Brahmin has of himself. But what is the image that we have of ourselves? And so when we think of in terms of harmonious imaging, we need to look carefully internally to see what it is that we have going on within ourselves, as well as what we project. And then the third stage of the Eightfold Path, commonly called right speech. But one of the things about this is, for Bhante would call it harmonious communication. What is the internal voices? How do we communicate with ourselves, as well as how we communicate with others? Again, with the Brahmin, very clear what communication he's intending as he rides around Savatthi. And then the fourth one is right action. And for Bhante Vimramsi, right action would be reframed as harmonious movement. And particularly movements of mind. So again, this internal perspective, what are the movements of mind that we have in response to various stimuli coming in through the senses? Can we see how our mind moves from one state to another? And what's the cause of that? So one of the things that we can think of, if we go back to right thought, is another interpretation of right thought is right intention. And clearly, with the Brahmin, there's a clear intention. But what are personal intention? And intention is one of the most important of the sankharas. In fact, it's probably the most important sankharas. So intention is, right on the top of our mental activities. Our thoughts are the way we think, the way our thoughts move into speech and into action. And then the fifth of these is right livelihood. And Bhante would often describe this as harmonious lifestyle. So what is it about the way we choose to live our life that is bringing balance? Where is the harmonious component of that? And then with right effort, which Bhante would reframe as harmonious practice, and he would describe that in terms of 6 R's. Right effort was the 6 R's. Recognizing when delusion had occurred. Why delusion? Because we've taken something personally. So the mind has then just been drawn away from whatever we've been doing, whether it's the meditation object in a formal practice or whatever we're doing in life. Our mind has been taken away. We release away from that and we relax the tension around our brain. Those first 3 steps are about purifying our mind, moving away from an unwholesome mindset. And it's unwholesome simply because we've taken it personally. With the releasing of the tension, we relax the craving, which was the original energy that took us away. But that's only half the process of right effort. The other half is retraining the mind. And that comes when we re-smile, because we are substituting a wholesome object for the unwholesome. And then we come back to the feeling of loving kindness. And this is why the Brahma Viharas are, if you like, a more helpful object of attention than the breath. The breath is neutral. It's neither wholesome or unwholesome. But if we work with the Brahma Viharas, these, the Buddha said, were blameless states. And as blameless states, they are wholesome. They're blameless because they cause us no harm and they cause no one else harm. So we're returning to, if you like, a higher state than the breath, in terms of its, if you like, psychological component. And so we've removed ourselves from the unwholesome and come back to the wholesome. And that is right effort. And right effort, Bhante would describe as a harmonious practice. Harmonious because it brings us back into balance. So here's this harmony again. And then the 7th of these is what we would call right mindfulness. But Bhante would reframe that as harmonious observation, because he was very clear that the task of the practice was simply to observe what was going on. If we could see the movements of mind and how they move from one mind state to the next clearly, without any filtering, we would understand where the source of suffering was. So harmonious observation was very important. And then finally, the last of the Eightfold Path, right concentration. Well, this is harmonious collectedness, this gathering of the mind to harness the capacity of the mind to observe something clearly. And all of those things, he would say, would be enhanced by smiling. So smiling supports the whole of the Eightfold Path. So picking up with the sutta, each of these steps of the Eightfold Path has as its final goal the removal of lust, the attachment to sensory experience, the outward senses, the removal of hatred, this sense of aversion. So we could paraphrase that as the I like it and the I don't like it mind, and the removal of delusion, which is taking the I out of the I like it and I don't like it. So when they're developed and cultivated, each of the steps of the Eightfold Path have this as their goal. In this way, Ananda, it may be understood how this is a designation for the Noble Eightfold Path, the divine vehicle, and the vehicle of Dharma, and the unsurpassed victory in battle. That is what the Blessed One said. And having said this, the Fortunate One, the teacher, further said this. Its qualities of faith. Now, faith, the Pali for faith is sada. And I find it useful to remember that sada can also be described as confidence. And as we begin to develop the levels of awareness through the practice of twin, our confidence naturally builds. Yes. Its qualities of faith and wisdom are always yoked evenly together. So this is like the pair of horses yoked together. Faith and wisdom, confidence and wisdom. Shame is its pole, mind its yoke tie, mindfulness the watchful charioteer. The chariot's ornament is virtue. So this is sila. Why is sila important? Well, the precepts, because they support our practice. The precepts are not commandments. There's no punishment involved if we break it. But if we break the precepts, what we find is our meditation goes less smoothly. And so the precepts are helpful. And they're helpful, as Sister Kema would describe, because they're like an umbrella that protect us from the impact of the hindrances. And the hindrances are our attachments, our aversions, our restlessness, our anger, our remorse. There are sloth and torpor. So this is the reluctance of the mind to practice or make an effort, and skeptical doubt, our doubt in the capacity of the teaching to deliver what it says, or of our personal capacity to do what the teaching asks of us. So, the chariot's ornament is this virtue. Its axle is jhana, these levels of understanding that we go through. Energy are its wheels, and equanimity keeps the whole of the chariot in balance. Desirelessness serves as upholstery. Desirelessness, well, that's the opposite of attachment. So, what does it mean to be desireless? Well, it doesn't mean that we don't enjoy the pleasant things, and we don't steer away from the unpleasant, but we don't attach to them. The pleasant, the unpleasant, or the neither pleasant or unpleasant are not under our control. They simply arise because the circumstances are right for them to do so. What is under our control is how we choose to relate to them. So we don't hold on and we don't push them away. We allow them to be themselves. And that's the desirelessness that's being described here. Goodwill, harmlessness, and seclusion. These are the chariot's weaponry. So, goodwill, the absence of ill will. What is the absence of ill will? Well, it's the cultivation of loving kindness. What's the absence of harm? Harmlessness, this is the cultivation of compassion. And seclusion, this is the non-engaging with the senses, not the non-operating of the senses, but the non-engaging, not going out and grabbing hold of or pushing away. So it's this attachment and aversion again. We seclude away from that aspect of the, what would otherwise be the natural way to work with our senses. Forbearance is its armor and shield. Okay. So this is the, if you like, the quality required in practice. To practice and to be with whatever we see. We don't practice simply to be calm. We practice to see clearly. And sometimes when we see clearly, it requires an element of forbearance because we may not want to see what it shows us. But that's part of the growth. And that's part of what will promote behavioral change as well as intellectual understanding as a part of the process. So forbearance is its armor and shield as it rolls towards security from bondage. And what is bondage? Well, bondage is when we take things personally. As soon as we do that, we are tied in and tied down. We've made some aspect of experience about me or mine or of myself. So we've now owned something that we're not in control of. We've made it part of ourselves. So when it starts to change in ways that we don't like, we feel this discontent around this. So this is the dukkha. The divine vehicle is unsurpassed, originates from within oneself. The wise depart from this world, or from the world in it, inevitably winning the victory. So what the Buddha is describing here is that all of the qualities that are outwardly manifested in the chariot can be inward qualities which actually generate freedom. The freedom from bondage. And with the freedom from bondage, we feel secure in a way that outward presentations don't provide. So it was necessary for Janussoni to go out every 6 months to remind everyone just how special he was. Whereas when we work and develop internally, we need nothing more than to experience it for ourselves, because that provides all of the security from bondage that we can actually have. And so there's a commentarial thing, a comment around the origination of this within oneself, because it has gained independence on one's own personal effort. And that's what Bhante Baramsi would always say on retreat. He would say, he could only guide. You had to be your own teacher. You had to see the experience within yourself to understand the teaching of the Buddha. And if you could see it clearly, then you would teach yourself from that experience directly. And this is what I most like about the Buddhist teaching, is that it's not based on faith, it's not based on the words of the Buddha. Every encouragement came from the Buddha for us to investigate for ourselves, to make it real within ourselves. And the consequence of that is that we get this security from bondage. So it's a very short sutta, but what I like about it is that it kind of resonates with, some of the things that we see manifesting in daily life, and where, perhaps people place value and attribute meaning to outward presentations of things. Whereas when we begin to investigate, when we begin to start the meditation practice, one of the first things that develops is that we apply ourselves because we found, something in the world isn't working for us in some way. Yes. So dukkha is kind of like the entry point into the practice, because when we suffer from dukkha, we can go from one way or the other. We can either go, into investigate why this is occurring and what we can do about it, or we go the way the Buddha said, towards distraction, to take us away from having to face this. And so, the world is full of external distractions to satisfy and distract us so that we don't have to look internally. But if we choose to look internally, then what we find is that we have this instigation that starts. And if I go to the first sutta in this chapter, I can just encourage this to move back. So what we start with is this investigation around the cause of suffering, if we're not going to go down the distraction route. And if we begin in that process, then that's the forerunner to an entry upon the wholesome. By choosing to investigate about the causes of suffering, it's the entry point to wholesome states. So with a sense of shame and fear of wrongdoing, follows along this investigation of wholesome states. For a wise person who has arrived at true knowledge, so this is beginning to listen to the teaching of the Buddha, right view springs up. Yeah, so you begin to develop right view. With right view springing up, one of right view, right intention springs up. So we have the right effort that we're making, or the right intention towards practice. And with right intention, right speech. Because once we begin to see the intentions behind our actions, it begins to change the way we communicate. With right speech, right action springs up. So our actions then begin to mirror, our communication with ourselves and with others. And with right action, right livelihood, or right lifestyle springs up. You're not going to be engaging in aspects of lifestyle which then contradict, all of these things that are come before. And with right livelihood, right effort springs up. And with right effort, right mindfulness springs up. And for one of right mindfulness, right concentration springs up. So we can see that this process, it just further supports the development down the path. Okay, so any reflections on that? Or perhaps we can just take a few minutes to absorb this sutta and just do a short practice. So feel your sense of contact with the ground, perhaps through your feet or through the seat of the chair, or if you're sitting cross-legged. Gently rotate your inner thighs to release your hips and open up your sacrum. And then drop the inner edge of your shoulder blades. So you feel a slight rotation in the shoulders, very small, but you feel space created around your heart. Now come into your energetic center, and that's just below the navel, deep in the body. And let this be the source of structure and support in your practice, so you can let your body go. You can let all the unnecessary tension disappear out of the body. Softly smile. Relax any holding and bracing around your brain, and then soften the crown of your head. And then bring up the object of meditation that you usually use, or if you're new to this, bring up a time when you felt joyful and happy. And let that feeling of joyfulness and happiness be present in you. Just as a memory, but feel the sensation of this, the somatic experience of this. And then let the image gently drop away. And stay with the feeling. Don't resist or push. Soften and smile. Bring your attention to the contact with the ground, wherever you're making that with your body. Connect to your breath. Take a deliberate breath in and a breath out. And slowly and gently open your eyes. So I particularly like this very short sutta because of its direct contrast between the outward and the inward, and how it's our responsibility, if you like, to find the value in the inward. It's easy to display the value outwardly, but how easy is it to understand the value inwardly? Any questions or comments? Yes, Andre.
Thanks, Hugh. I really like the sutta. I have a question about the first paragraph, particularly about the mention of shame. Shame is its pole, mind its yoke tie. What is? Can you go in a little bit of detail? What is meant by that? By the shame part.
The Buddha's attitude about shame is that we should be careful to avoid actions that create a sense of shame. So we should guard our actions against that. So you can think of this as perhaps as an extension of the precepts. if we break the precepts, then depending on what's occurred, we tend to hide what's happened out of shame or out of remorse or out of guilt. And so what we want to recognize is that shame is, if you like, part of recognizing the process of shame is recognizing part of the process of development as an individual. So we're often invited by the Buddha to guard the senses, but also to guard the actions that come from the senses. And so to see our intention clearly. And if we can see our intention clearly, then our chances of action or speech, which then causes a sense of shame, are likely to be removed. So the awareness of the possibility of shame, I think, is to assist us in that guarding process. Yeah, so, to inquire.
Oh, sorry. So in this analogy, this shame process is something that propels us forward, or that sort of drives this chariot.
It doesn't hold us back. If our actions or our thoughts create a sense of shame, then I think this is something that holds us back. And so this is why on retreat, and certainly within the monastic tradition, they go through, I think it's either a 2-weekly or 4-weekly process where they confess any breaking of the rules. And it's to address this possibility, not to hide things, not to bury them within, but to reveal them and to learn from them. But I'm very happy to have other people come in on that and with their view, because I think it's a good question here. Yeah, Sarah.
So it's related, but not exactly the same. Because I think the opposite of shame is when we don't see what our actions are causing at all. And this came up in conversation with my daughter just yesterday evening. And she was describing some interactions with a particular friend and in a group dynamic, and how this one friend has a tendency to garner all of the attention. And there were various analogies, and one, for example, and it's not just garnering attention, it's also kind of claiming space at the expense of others. So they're teenagers, and so the example given was one friend had been to a gig and had been in a mosh pit. So for anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's when there's a lot of dancing and you get trampled and bashed. And so the friend said, "Oh, I got really trampled and it hurt." And my daughter was saying her other friend's reaction was, that wouldn't have been a real mosh pit because it was such and such a band. I've been to a real mosh pit. And my daughter was saying, "Oh, what?" She said, "I didn't say anything. And I feel maybe I should have stepped in and said something," because she recognized that the person on the receiving end of that, it wasn't a kind statement for this other friend. And our conversation moved into, what did the friend see for herself? And my daughter's impression is she literally doesn't see the impact of these kind of interactions. My mosh pit's better than your mosh pit. So it's a bit like my white chariot is bigger than your brown chariot. And it happens a lot. And so we talked about how actually, and this is what I picked up from the sutta today, the person in the white chariot often I'm just wondering how hard it is to see that you've got him one. I think my daughter's friend literally doesn't see at all. And then unfortunately, downstream, she gets a bit upset about things. So another example, because they're quite funny, these examples, because they're so kind of daily life, and they're really into their music. And my daughter and her friend have very similar tastes. And this particular friend is getting very excised by, we like all the same things, but when you put your choice of music on for the group, which is exactly the same as mine, everyone loves it. And I put my choice on and no one is very interested. And so we were trying to unpick the framework through which the same choice of music is being presented. And my daughter was saying she chooses music that she likes, but every choice is also based on what she feels her friends would like. And so we were starting to see that, oh, this is a framework which is inclusive. And so the other friend's choice is exactly the same choice of music, but she expresses when she picks it, this is the music I want to play and you will like it because it is really good. And so there's a didactic sharing, like, I'm in the white carriage and you will notice that it's white and gleaming because it's beautiful and shiny. So they're very different. They're kind of, on the one hand, things can appear, this is an example of one hand, things can appear the same, but actually they come from very different places. So just to wrap all of that up, how hard it is for this particular friend to understand why her choice of music isn't accepted. She's really, really caught. And yet this is the person with so much energy, so much charisma. She's an incredibly engaging individual, but this is completely invisible to her. And so the sutta just brought that out for me in full relief, how personalities that we can find quite difficult at times, but who are also very engaging. Maybe it's very, very hard from this kind of lens of experience to actually see the impact of what you're up to. So that's what I wanted to share. It's a bit long, sorry.
No, thank you. Thank you. Yes, Stephen.
Just first off, thank you so much, Hugh, today for such a beautiful Dharma talk. It was very needed today, and it resonated. A lot of things resonated. And thank you, Sarah, for posting it on the UK TWIM site. I wouldn't have. I'm not in terms of being full disclosure to the Sangha group. I was feeling very lazy today, and I saw the. I knew. I'm not going to lie. I knew that there was a group meeting today, but I was going to go onto Netflix, and then I saw Sarah's post, and it provided the necessary catalyst to stop being lazy. So I appreciate you both. Thank you. I wasn't going to make like a comment or a question, but something that you just said, Sarah, really kind of resonated, and something that it all kind of fit together today. Something that when you were talking, Hugh, I'm reading a book at the moment called Atomic Habits. And the last thing that you touched on, where you were saying one thing provides the catalyst for the next, kind of it lays the foundations for the next. It really struck me, and something that I struggled with for quite a long time when I first started practicing, that I thought, I'm going to do a retreat for 10 days in Thailand, and I'm going to come out and I'm going to be wholly enlightened with a halo around me, and I'm never going to have any problems again. And then after about 3 or 4 days of feeling quite serene, that would dissipate, and I'll be back to the same challenges and procrastinations and habits as before. So that really resonated. But what I wanted to make a comment on was something that you were just saying, Sarah, which is a conversation that I've been having with a family member at the moment, and kind of dealing with challenging behavior. And there's a podcast called with a chap called Lex Friedman, and he had a Dr. Sharon Curry on, and she was talking about when she has people that have kind of like conflict about certain behavior patterns that the other person doesn't get, they'll come in and they'll talk about things that have happened in their past, things that have happened in their childhood, and start to try and understand why they sort of behave the way that they do. And once there's that kind of like understanding of where this conditioning is coming from, why they're, you know, exhibiting this sort of behavioral pattern, there's a huge amount of empathy that's kind of arises as a consequence of that. And I was talking to this family member about a behavior of her partner. He doesn't like to throw things away. He likes to kind of like collect things and like hoard them a little bit, but it can make a bit of clutter. So we were speaking about that, and she watched the podcast, and it really kind of gave her an insight into like why there's this pattern of behavior. So yeah, so I was thinking as you were saying it, you know, to kind of like look at that behavior maybe in a way that, well, why is that person, you know, is that person doing it because she wants to make the other person look bad, or is she saying it because she wants to feel the others kind of value her and look up to her and, you know, want her to be part of the group? And then just finally just kind of like applying that like to myself, you know, well, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? Why, you know, if I say something that's kind of has an impact on someone, well, why am I saying that? Is it do I want to be mean, or is it coming from something else? So yeah, I just wanted to share that. Lots of gold nuggets today in this Dharma talk and chat. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you for that feedback. Yes, Andre.
Yeah, I also wanted to mention something. Yeah, Sarah, thank you so much for sort of taking this both today and last Sunday as well, and taking some of these suttas and really bringing them down to practical applications. And yeah, today was for me the biggest nugget was it's sometimes it's easy to see aversion as a hindrance. It's easy to see lust as a hindrance, but delusion sometimes can be a little bit difficult, right? Yeah. And it's very nice today where Hugh, you mentioned that, yeah, delusion can be as simple as taking things personally, right? Yeah. And then yeah, Sarah, in the story that you told about your daughter's friend, it's interesting because there's no, you know, maybe there's some slight aversion or there's some slight lust for, you know, affection or being, which is very slight, right? But the difference between when, you know, your daughter plays this music or her friend plays the music is largely due to this, you know, taking it personally or taking it not so personally because the interest of others at stake. And it can be as simple as this intention, right? Which is just doing it for others or doing it for the sake of yourself that can make a huge difference. And that to me is, yeah, that was kind of it was a story about delusion, right? It was a story about taking it personally versus not, and how much of a difference it can make. And then also, Stephen, like you said, you know, how much are we doing this in daily life, and like where is it coming from? And so to me, it clarified a lot of these things, you know, because I'm trying to be, you know, mindful of these things. Yeah, and yeah, the version, easy, lust, you know, easy, delusion. Like this is the confusing one. So this is a really good example, and it's really good sutta for that, to see how else we may be hindering ourselves and how that may be propagating, and where we can see symptoms of our delusion around us in everyday life. So yeah, it was very small, it was very concise, but yeah, with everybody's input, it's quite a wise little piece of knowledge there. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Andre. And like I say, just saying again, I kind of like the contrast here. One is an outward manifestation, and Sarah's illustration here was, you know, looking for outward affirmation from a sort of contribution. and one is an inward reflection. And the inward reflection is, where do I find this value within myself? But also the inward reflection is, I don't need to put myself completely forward in pole position. I can, we can come together, if you like. Can I have my selection of music whilst also meeting the enjoyment and satisfaction of the people that I'm with, and so their liking it doesn't detract from it being my choice.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, Sarah. Oh, well, Sarah or May, whichever has come on first. Yes, Sarah.
I just wanted to pick up on this and something that Stephen was saying, because it's a shame my daughter isn't with us today, because she's full of really great stuff. And our conversation developed into kind of where would we go with this in terms of when to speak up or not. And I was telling her about some of the suttas where the Buddha gives guidance about discernment and how to work out, because she was asking, so when would I say something and when wouldn't I? When is it helpful? When is it isn't? When isn't it? And so we started talking about saying the truth isn't always going to be wholesome. Sometimes it's harming, and it's a question of what you're perceiving at that time as to the what you can bring in. But the thing I wanted to pick up on, because it fits very much with what Hugh's kind of described with the Brahma Viharas and how just wholesome they are for us, not just in practice but all the time, is I was explaining to her about how these qualities are with practice, they become accessible to bring into situations, and it's a non-verbal then engagement. And she basically just hoovered it all up. And so I said, so if you kind of basically hear or feel, if you like, some ill will in a situation, then it isn't a possibility for whatever reason of verbalizing anything. This is where you can bring loving kindness into a situation. And yeah, this she said felt extremely this felt really, really good. So the Brahma Viharas become a very dynamic engagement in social interaction. They're not just an experience that's personal for us within our practice. And I think this is opening up the field to a very multi-dimensional way of listening and communicating that has just huge power within it. So you're not then left completely isolated and powerless and unable to speak or do anything. There's always the possibility of stepping forward and out with the energy that you bring into the situation. And so this felt like a very, we had a really good chat about it. And there was more that where this went, I was very surprised. So this is another example of how, from a place of something feeling very tricky and questioning around the dynamics and how do I hold myself, how do I engage with others, this is a sort of area of delusion, like Andre's saying, an area of confusion. We had an amazing evening chatting about it all and sharing about the Brahma Viharas, and we were going to watch a film too, Stephen, and the film didn't happen, and we just lay on the bed chatting about all of this stuff. So yeah, good things can follow from the delusion. That was the point. That's what I wanted to say.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. May, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I just, when Sarah mentioned it all, because, I teach kids from the age of 6 to 14, my oldest student, piano, not Dharma. I can see that one of the key things I think that's plaguing our younger generation nowadays is that social media and everything that they expose themselves to is not helping. Everyone's comparing themselves with the other, and the way I see it, the traditional education system is also not helping as well, because we are all taught to compete with one another rather than to collaborate, and people start to think that it's a zero-sum game in the world. But having said that, there are shifts. There is a shift that I see at the moment. There are some thought leaders in the world today that are saying it is not a zero-sum game, and collaboration actually leads to more success. Coming back to the girls and the chat, which is so common, and it's not only limited to teenagers. We see it in the workplace as well. It's just a different form. Right, we see it in our families, we see it in our communities. It's basically everywhere as long as we open our eyes. And I can't help but come back to MN 18, Honey Bowl Sutta, because right in that sutta, the Buddha said, like, it doesn't make any sense for us to argue with anyone, because all of us our perceptions are colored, and they're colored by the X amount of experiences that we've had since childbirth. So who are we to, there's even no point to even raise any kind of discussion or argument whatsoever because of that basis, that foundation. And therefore, again, like what Sarah said, because of that very basis, the best thing we can do is practice loving kindness and really harness that, because we can really change the energy at that moment. Like, I don't know if anyone in the group or anyone listening has tried it. I'm not a very high practitioner or anything, but really just by smiling, even if we can't even generate loving kindness, just having that smile. I mean, anyone who's tried it, I've tried a couple times. I tried out of curiosity more than anything, I tried like just to see, what the reaction of, the cashier behind the counter, or, the guy that's selling whatever, but I'm very careful. Yeah. So I tend to, test that with females more than with males, just to be careful, don't want to send wrong signals out there. But just that very act, which is so simple, right? Just smile. It really can, at that moment, change the energy. Just at that moment, yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter what happens for that person the rest of the day, but right at that moment. And for me, I feel like sometimes if it doesn't change anything and I can't do anything about it, the best thing I can do is walk away. Because I feel like the more I practice this, and I was just sending a message to Dr. Madhusudanji a couple of weeks ago. He read the Karma Sutta, where everything that arises, what we see, smell, hear, taste, touch, we forgive it. We forgive it. Everything, all the stimuli that comes through us. And I said to him, I thanked him personally, because for me that really resonated, in the sense that if we can do that throughout the day with every single experience that comes up, it's very powerful. And not just because the Buddha said it, or forgiveness is a practice. And when I came to, you know, this first paragraph here, its qualities of faith and wisdom are always yoked evenly together. I got curious because, wait, hang on a sec, because we see a lot in the suttas that the Buddha said, samatha and vipassana are always evenly yoked together. Tranquility and wisdom are always evenly yoked together. So I'm thinking, wait, so he's saying here confidence and wisdom are also evenly yoked together. I got interested because I'm like, in a way it's true, because, and also it got me thinking, and Hugh maybe care to clarify or disagree. You know, Bhante Vimalaramsa used to say, think of the word wisdom as understanding of dependent origination. My question actually is, what about if wisdom could also be associated in this case with the understanding of the three characteristics of, you know, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and the impersonal nature of everything? What if just the very fact of us throughout our daily practice, we are able to see, and daily life, we're able to see that everything that comes up really is just, you know, it's always changing. It really has nothing to do with us, you know, just by the very nature that whatever I perceive is just based on whatever, you know, my system tells me. And it's the same with everyone else. And just with that understanding alone, that gives us the confidence to, you know, build upon that, you know, further. I don't know if I'm making any sense with my gibberish here, but I'm just trying to think, like, sometimes when we read suttas, we think like, you know, it's like, whoa, way up there and very complex and everything. The more I read the suttas, and thanks to Hugh and Dr. Madhusudanji and all our guides, the more I start to see actually what the Buddha is trying to say here is really, he broke it down to very simple bite size for us. Like he knew a lot more, obviously, about, you know, the universe, the worlds and everything. But he so cleverly broke it down to like, these are the pieces that you guys need. That's all. That's it, you know? And he put it in such a way, it's almost like, you know, it's almost like, here is this. And sometimes Sister Kema said, you know, people always ask, you know, teach me meditation, and it has to come in like a 1999 kind of box, right? And which is true, it doesn't come in a 1999 box, but sometimes I feel like actually the Buddha did break it down for us really quite nicely, and very straightforwardly. Yeah. So that's
well, I would like to agree with what you're saying there, in the sense that you know, I think the whole of the Buddha's teaching is a movement from complexity to simplicity. And, you know, there's nothing like delusion for creating complexity. And in the way that Sarah was illustrating with that example, you know, there was a need to become special and different, and then to be appreciated that you're special and different. Whereas actually, if you don't need that boundary around you, then, you know, the experience of that engagement is very different. And so if you're looking at the overall, the fact that you're curating some music together for the pleasure of the other people, but from your perspective, then that adds to everyone. If you're trying to do it by to establish that you're special and different, then that's not that process. That's something else. And that is part of the delusion. The things that when we take things personally, we automatically put ourselves in the bracket of being special and different. And and that's what we need to dissolve away. And the Buddha's invitation is to do that. And he says, if you do this, things will get an awful lot simpler. And I think it's just part of the human brain that it actually moves towards complexity rather than towards simplicity, unless it has a particular training, because we accumulate. The special and different is a process of accumulation. The opposite of that is the process of not accumulating, of gradually, dropping away, things becoming simpler and less complex. Sarah.
Just thought I ought to add one thing about this special and different, because we were exploring it from a particular way around, but there's another one which is very close to me, which is once upon a time I was described as having a reverse ego, which was news to me. But this is like the accumulation of the unwholesome view about yourself, not good enough, the low self-esteem, the kind of not being appreciated, that kind of stuff. So this is also an accumulation of special and different, but it comes in a reverse manifestation from the imposing of yourself in maybe that we've been looking at. So they seem to me like they're two sides of the same coin. And we need to be alert to the delusion of any of it.
So what you're describing there, I think, to a degree, is that sort of self-deprecation type approach. And then we have, the opposite side of that is the accumulation, which is around things moving towards arrogance. And one of the things there is, self-deprecation needs to actually be humility, not self-deprecation. And arrogance doesn't need to be arrogance, it needs to be confidence. So one of the things a phrase that I particularly like is the development of confident humility. So confident about where you are, but humble enough to realize you've got more to do. and that's for me is the sort of the nugget of this, and how easy it is to spill into the other side of that, which is either the arrogance or the self-deprecation. And I think picking up something that Andre asked right at the start, so where's the role of shame? Well, now we're beginning to see as we migrate out into this, that shame is useful in the sense that we see the impact and then we think, could have done something different. And then shame, in that sense, becomes a positive way of beginning to steer around that, as long as we don't hide our shame. If we hide our shame, then but if we acknowledge the shame, we learn from it. Stephen, yeah.
And it already ties wonderfully together with what we're talking about today, in that, like what Andre was just talking about in terms of shame, you can look at shame in two ways, right? You can look at it as something personal where it affects your psychology, or you can look at it in a way that you and Sarah were just talking about, and May was just talking about as well, in terms of that non-personal attachment to shame. So that constant wisdom, identifying, how is this impacting other people? How is this speech or action impacting others, impacting myself? Is it harmful? Is it wholesome? Is it unwholesome? Is it fruitful? And constantly making those recalibrations. So instead of it becoming this kind of like this event that kind of leads into a habitual tendency of criticizing, like Sarah was saying, like, not feeling worthy, not feeling good enough. I'm saying this again, I'm doing this again, or that, my action, my thought is right, more valid than anyone else's. Just that constant recalibration to get better and better kind of habits. I guess wisdom lies at the center of all of it, right?
Absolutely, and I think that's that's where the role of for one, this rather Christian term, confession, with the monks sort of every fortnight or every month, is very helpful, because it's that process of if you like, revealing and then learning, and as long as it's not being revealed into an environment which is critical and judgmental and diminishing, but
yeah,
one
absolutely.
Yeah.
I was in Thailand last year, and I was doing a meditation retreat at a temple in Chiang Mai, and I walked past the main sala, and there was all of this laughing, and I asked one of the nuns, because it was so sort of what's the word, like, not out of place. I'd never, because it was very kind of like rambunctious and quite loud, and I was asking her, oh, what's going on? I could feel myself kind of like, with my temperament, being drawn to it, because I like to giggle and laugh quite a lot as well. And she was saying, oh, I can't remember the name of the Thai, there's a specific word for it, I don't know if it's Thai or Pali, but they're doing their confession. They're basically talking, it was the new kind of, not new recruits, I don't know why that popped into my mind, but like the new kind of younger monks had just come on, and they had done their ceremony, and it was a few weeks after, and they were confessing some of their kind of, now I couldn't understand what they were saying, but it was such a beautiful environment for them to confess, right? And I'm sure whatever it was must have been hysterical. I wish I could have understood what they were saying. But yeah, very, very much agree with that, Hugh, that it's the kind of environment within which you feel comfortable to, like, non-judgmental, understanding, empathetic environment, that's so important.
I think we should rename it unburdening.
Yes. Yeah. Andre.
So so this whole shame thing, it sounds like with the right environment, recognizing shame for what it is, which actually can be thought of as remorse, right? And then we can actually turn this remorse into wisdom and sort of use it to steer this chariot, if you will, in the right direction, even though until we have the wisdom not to produce any karma that would generate this remorse or shame, then we have to rely on this sort of backfeeding mechanism that's delayed to see the how we can refine our actions, right? So something like that, yeah?
Yeah, well, I think the sutta confirms that, because shame is the pole. The pole is what steers the chariot.
Okay, I didn't understand what the pole is.
The pole is, comes from the front wheels and then comes in between the two animals, and then they're yoked together on the pole. So as they move, the pole moves, and the pole moves the wheels, and maybe there's a confirmation. Maybe there's not just a random association here, but if we understood chariots a bit more, maybe there'd be another layer of understanding within the sutta as well.
And shame can be a beautiful thing. I mean, without shame, Andre, I think that that's the good conditioning. That's your moral compass, kind of gently and quietly, softly telling the action or the thought or whatever it is that this is not aligned with your value system. If shame didn't arise, then what value system would there be, right?
Or indeed others contributing in and reframing your perspective, from which you then realize that your actions actually had something that you would then feel shame about. So that it comes from both ways. It comes internally, and if it's constructive, it can come externally. Yeah. Okay. Anything anyone else would like to add? Yes, Sarah.
I hesitate, but it's just because this is such a good it's such a good discussion, and talking about the external kind of input that we can receive or we can give out. I'm just coming back to the example I gave, and the friend that is quite dominant. And it shows just what a responsibility there is around my daughter's question when she was saying, when do I speak up? I didn't say anything. I chose to stay quiet. I think now that was the wrong decision because I should have helped my friend who was on the receiving end of a kind of comment that could have been hurtful. And the thing is, when personalities are so dominant, they're very out and forward and forward. There can be a tendency, if you're very good at listening, which my daughter is, to listen a bit more and listen and wait. And listen and then not say anything at all. So I think this is very interesting because it invites us to reflect, when is it appropriate to listen and step forward and speak? Because it's that is the external interface for the other person. Because if they don't ever get it, how are they going to meet it? Which may be very uncomfortable for them, but it will create conditions where they're not constantly stepping forward. They've met something moving towards them that they're going to have to develop a new reaction around, new response around. So I think this is a very, I think this is an important point. It's certainly something that I have to reflect on. My conditioning has been one to be, in some instances, moving back, not in all, by any means. And so I think we can also have manifestations where there's conditioning where we don't speak up, as well as circumstances where we over speak up. So it is a very, very considerable confusion and delusion.
Well, the Buddha identified this around right speech, about saying, we need to know what our intention is. Is it to help or is it to harm? Is it the right time? Are they going to be receptive? There are so many things. But if it's judged right, then, your daughter doesn't just help the person who was felt put down, but helps the other person as well. Yeah. But the challenge is always whether it's received in that way. And with friendships, it's always difficult because there's this underlying requirement not to damage the friendship. But when is compliance or stepping back actually damaging the friendship in its own way?
Yeah, thanks, Hugh. That's the bit I wanted to bring out, because I think this is an aspect that we, because it's more hidden, we can discount. Actually, it can be harming not to step forward for the wider wholesome situation. Yeah, so it's really.
But you've almost got to step forward, just like in the meditation, if you like, without an expectation of an outcome. Yeah, and that's so it's not so much fixing the issue, but rather than establishing a boundary which has virtue within it, if you like. Yeah.
And the light touch, the laughing is super helpful for that.
Yes.
And other people will feel it, even if it is a confrontation to their own perspective.
Yeah.
Laughing, the smiling intention, that energy, it is very, very affirming here.
Well, then you can immediately relate it into the practice, because when it's not done from a laughing place, as it were, what it creates is tension in the individual. And that tension is the process of taking the comment personally. But if you include, if you like, the lightness, then that tension has the possibility of dissipating. So although it may start as feeling personal, you know, it has the possibility, and we always need to give the space for an individual to be able to release that tension. And sometimes in exchanges, you know, when the mind is about, you know, I need to win this point, you actually want them to go away feeling the tension, because then they know they've lost. But if you don't come from the perspective of needing to win, but simply the perspective of restoring balance, then it's okay for this tension to dissipate. And that's our experience in the meditation all the time. We notice when we take it personally, and then we 6R, we release, relax, re-smile, come back, and come back into balance. Okay, I think we've explored this very fully. So unless anyone wants to particularly come in with another comment, which is always space to do, we can share some merit. Okay. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Well, thank you very much. It's been deeply enjoyable, and I look forward to the time we have a chance to do this again. And welcome, Stephen, for joining today, and we look forward to seeing you again. All right.
Thank you, Hugh.
Okay.
Nice to see everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
Hugh. Thank you all.